share my slide. And you can hear me okay, right, Nora?
Yep, perfectly.
All right, perfect. All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for having me today, Nora. I'm going to talk to the group today about disability insurance. We're going to talk about short-term and long-term policies. And my name is Patti Dorn. I'm with the Maryland Insurance Administration, specifically with their Consumer Education and Advocacy Unit. If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat at any point while I'm speaking. Some of the questions I will take as I go through. If it takes a little bit more detail, I might save it to the end and kind of we'll do like a Q&A. And I am also going to put my email address in the chat too. So if you end up with any questions that you don't want to ask in the chat, you can go ahead and send me an email, or if you have questions in the future as well. All right. So the Maryland Insurance Administration, that's who I work for. The Maryland Insurance Administration, we're the state agency that regulates insurance in Maryland. So that's why I'm here talking to you about short-term and long-term disability, because for the most part, those are insurance products that are offered by insurance companies. The Maryland Insurance Administration, we license the insurance companies that do business in Maryland, and we license the insurance producers. The insurance producers are the agents and the brokers. We examine the business practices of these licensees to ensure compliance. And what that means is we make sure that those insurance companies that operate in Maryland follow the laws, Maryland state laws and federal laws, and we make sure that those insurance producers follow the laws as well. We monitor the solvency of insurers. That means that we're tracking those financials, we're analyzing those financials, and we're making sure that those insurance companies that are operating in Maryland are going to have the money to pay your claims. So we review the insurance policy forms in our office, and we ensure that rates that are charged to Marylanders are not inadequate, because the insurers, they need to be collecting enough money to stay in business and pay your claims in the future, but that they're also not excessive or unfairly discriminatory. We also investigate consumer and provider complaints and allegations of fraud. So this is important. You know, as an insurance consumer, you can file a complaint against your insurance company with us. You can file a complaint against an agent or a broker with us. These things cannot be held against you. You can also file, if you suspect insurance fraud, you can file that with us too, and we will investigate all allegations of insurance fraud. And I just want to say I'm a little under the weather, so I'm going to be drinking a little bit more water than usual. My voice is a little, you can probably tell I'm a little bit sick. So apologies for that. All right, so hopefully that gave a good introduction to, you know, why I'm the one talking to you today about disability insurance. All right, so all right. I do have there's a question in the chat already. This is going to be one that I'm going to take at the end. So for most adult Marylanders, income from our jobs is critical to maintaining our standard of living. Okay, so most of us work to pay our bills. Not everyone's income from their jobs is necessarily necessary for their standard of living. There's some lucky people in that case, but for most of us, it is critical to maintaining our standard of living. We use our income from work for rent, mortgage payments, utilities, groceries, auto expenses, saving for college and retirement, as well as many other expenses. Short-term and long-term disability insurance offers protection for lost wages in many situations when you get sick or you're injured and you cannot work. While most disability insurance policies don't cover 100% of lost income. So for the most part, there's very few that cover 100%. It can provide you with some help with your expenses while you're unable to work. All right, so this is the heaviest slide. We're a regulating entity, right? We enforce the laws, and disability will be defined in your policy in a certain kind of legalese kind of way. Many policies define it as such. He or she is unable to perform the material duties of his or her regular occupation, or solely due to injury or sickness is unable to earn more than 80% of his or her income. And after disability benefits have been payable for at least 12 months, he or she is unable to perform the material duties of any occupation for which he or she may reasonably become qualified for based on education that already exists, training or experience that already exists, or solely due to injury or sickness is unable to earn more than 80% of his or her income. I understand that that's a lot to process on a slide. The point that we want to make with this slide is that disability will be defined in a very specific way in any short-term or long-term disability policy. And that it's important to read the language. It's important to understand the language, talk to your agent or your broker so they can help you understand it, but also know that what's on the slide here isn't the law. It can be defined in different ways from policy to policy. So disability will be defined in a specific way in any short-term or long-term disability policy. And it may be defined slightly differently from policy to policy. All right, so now we're just going to step back out to that and more normal talk. What is a disability? So many people think of severe injuries or a catastrophic health condition as the leading cause of disability. But they're more commonly the result, as you know, as most of us know, they're more commonly the result of less severe injuries and common conditions. Heart disease, back pain, arthritis, mental health conditions, and digestive disorders can all lead to disabilities that make us unable to work. So when we talk about short and long-term disability, I think it's important to understand where workers' compensation fits into this, as well as Social Security disability insurance. And I'm going to touch on both of them. I'm not going to go into great deal on either one of them. It doesn't fall under my jurisdiction, but I'm going to help you understand where that fits in with these short-term and long-term disability policies. So most of us Maryland workers, we understand that if we're injured on the job or we experience an illness that's caused by our job, that you're likely covered for lost wages by workers' compensation. Workers' compensation provides coverage when the illness or injury happens at work or is a result of work activities. However, most disabilities do not occur at work, and consequently, most disabilities are not covered by workers' compensation. And I do have the link to the workers' compensation. There are links throughout this presentation. I know you can't click on them now, but Nora does have the slides if you want a copy of the slides. Sorry for my water breaks. So short and long-term disability insurance, it provides partial income replacement if you get too sick or injured to work. Most disability insurance policies pay you a percentage of your income if you get sick with a serious illness or experience an injury that's preventing you from doing your job. Some cover you in the short term immediately after an incident or illness. Others pay you for an extended period of time. So the short term immediately after is generally the short-term policies. Usually short-term disability policies cover you for up to 6 months. So that first 6 months, and then long-term policies after you've been disabled for 6 months or more. That's in general. It can change from policy to policy. In general, a short-term disability policy helps you immediately after. The long-term policy helps provide financial protection for disabilities that can last for years. However, and this is important, by law, disability insurance benefits can vary widely. It's important to read and understand the policy that you purchase. Talk to that agent, talk to that broker, call us if you need to, if it's not clear, and make sure that you understand what you're purchasing. You must continue to meet the definition of disabled as outlined in your policy. So I introduced you to a definition of disabled, kind of a generic one. You would continue to meet that definition to continue to collect benefits. Most policies require periodic updates from your providers to support that you are still disabled. So short-term disability. This insurance replaces a portion of your income in the event of a disability. Just a statistic, each year, approximately 5, so that's 1 in 20 American workers experience a short-term disability. Short-term disability policies generally pay benefits for those short periods of time. So 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, typically 6 months, but some of them are only 3, some of them are up to a year. And oftentimes they have a brief waiting period called an elimination period. And you can think of an elimination period as kind of like your deductible. In most cases, it's going to be 2 weeks. Benefit payments typically start within 2 weeks of a qualifying illness or injury, the elimination period. So much like the long-term care insurance policies, if you've ever looked into those, oftentimes they have 30 or 90 days. And with these short-term disability policies, it's usually 2 weeks. It could be longer, it could be less. Short-term disability insurance usually replaces between 40 and 70% of a policyholder's income. And that's going to be defined in your policy. So it will define, you purchased this policy, okay, it's going to cover 60%. In order to qualify for disability benefits from an employer, an insurance company, or the government, as we said, the beneficiary's disability must meet the definition of disability as defined. So employers may have a policy with a certain definition. Again, here we're talking about insurance companies or the government. In the case of SSDI, you must meet their definition of disability, and this must be confirmed by a physician, by a medical provider, as defined in the policy. It may not have to be a physician, but it will be defined in the policy who needs to confirm it. Short-term disability insurance can be expensive to purchase as an individual policy. So that's just an FYI. And not everyone gets offered a short-term disability insurance policy through work, but a lot of people do, especially if you're working for a large employer. It's highly likely that you're offered a short-term disability policy through work. If you're self-employed, this may be something that you need to purchase on your own, or you might consider looking into on your own. Group plans are typically less expensive than long-term group plans. Many employers offer a short-term disability group plan as a company paid or partial company paid benefit to all employees. That's quite common. And maybe it's just paid, or you have to sign up for it and you have to pay a premium. Or in some cases, maybe you just need to sign up for it. Again, if it's not something that you've looked into at work, I do recommend finding out what is offered to you with regards to short-term and also long-term. To trigger your benefits from a short-term disability policy, you're going to generally submit a claim to the insurer, and it's going to include information about your situation from the healthcare provider. Under the terms of most policies, the benefits are paid directly to you without limitation on how you can use that money. So for the most part, this is an amount of cash. You use it just as you would your income. That is your choice, what bills you're paying and how you're using that money. While employees can qualify for time off to care for a sick relative under FMLA, the Family and Medical Leave Act, short-term disability policies will not provide benefits if the employee or the policyholder, if you're purchasing this policy on your own, is not the one with the injury or illness. So in almost all cases, you're not going to be able to use you can take time off work to care, for a relative, but you would not in those cases be able to use the disability insurance in that situation. so long-term disability insurance. These policies generally kick in after at least 6 months, after meeting the policy definition of disabled. Could you have a short-term policy and a long-term policy with 2 different definitions of disabled? You could. Something to be aware of. So again, the idea is that they work together. In a perfect situation, your short-term policy ends, your long-term policy kicks in. Many employers offer group long-term disability as a job benefit. Just like short-term, long-term is commonly offered as a job benefit. So it's possible that you don't pay premiums at all, or it's possible that it's subsidized, or maybe you are required to pay, if you want the policy, you pay the entire premium yourself. But it's good to remember that that's probably, the premium is probably going to be less than what you could get if you bought it outside of a group plan. So many work in tandem with those short-term disability policies. Short-term ends and long-term disability begins. And I'm sure oftentimes employers design it so it really is, 6 months short-term, and after that, the long-term would kick in. Without an STD policy in place, there may be a 3 to 6 month waiting period. So what that sentence means is, if you said, hey, I can't, I'm buying these on my own and I can't afford both, it could be a rational decision to just choose to go with the long-term disability policy and say, hey, if it was a 3 to 6 month situation, I guess I would be taking care of that in another way. But just if the short term isn't in effect, there may be 3 to 6 month waiting period, or longer, depending on the long-term policy and when it kicks in, because you can purchase a policy that won't kick in for a year. So they're just things to think about. Obviously, we're all out there doing the best we can. Some of these policies don't line up perfectly, and just make sure that you understand what you have, or what you're purchasing, or what you're thinking about purchasing. So these policies, these long-term disability policies, they generally pay benefits for a duration of time longer than a year. So oftentimes it's as long as you continue to meet the definition of disability. So some policies will just say, as long as you continue to meet the definition of disability, you will be paid. Some of them might say, we're going to pay you to a certain age, such as 65. And some may have a defined period of time. So a long-term disability policy might be good for 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years. Again, it's going to change from policy to policy, and it's going to depend on the policy that you have. And again, you have to continue to meet that insurer's definition of disability. These long-term disability plans typically cover between 60 and 80% of lost wages. And again, for anybody who just joined, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And I think for the most part, I'm going to be getting to the questions after the presentation's over. So qualifying for long-term can be different than with a short-term disability policy. It can be, it might not be. With the short-term disability policy, the benefits are generally awarded when the policyholder is unable to do their job. Sometimes there are long-term disability benefits out there that are awarded only if an employee is unable to do any job. So it's important to read and understand the disability insurance policy that you're purchasing. Again, I say this over and over. It's just because by law, the disability policies are allowed to be designed in many different ways. And so it can vary from policy to policy. And so it just makes it really important that you understand the policy that you have or that you're purchasing. In most cases, if and when an employer policyholder qualifies for another form of income replacement, such as Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI, the long-term disability policy may request reimbursement of benefits paid. That's something else to find out with your policy. How does my long-term disability policy work if I'm awarded Social Security disability benefits? Do I just keep collecting it and I collect the SSDI, or will it be reduced by the SSDI amount? Important to know. It's going to change from policy to policy. All right, so where does SSDI fit in with long-term and short-term? Social Security Disability Insurance, this is a federal program for individuals who suffer from disabilities that prevent them from working for at least 1 year. If you qualify for SSDI, the income provided currently averages about $14,000 a year. Now, I think most people understand that there's a lot of variance in that number. The average is $14,000 a year, but it is, it's based on how much money you've made in the past, et cetera, how long you've been working, and it's going to change drastically from person to person. Being awarded Social Security disability benefits can take months or years, as many people know. It's important to understand what your own benefits will be if you qualified for the program, and how any disability policy you own or are considering purchasing will work if you are awarded Social Security disability insurance benefits. And so that additional information is on the bottom of the page if you want more information on that. But again, I'm not going to go into it with any more detail. I just think it's important that you understand how these programs work together. They're not essentially working together, but how the policy defines it and how it's going to pay out if you're awarded Social Security disability. So at a minimum, disability policies help you bridge that gap between work and qualifying for SSDI benefits. Most people know that it can take a while to qualify for SSDI benefits. Having a short-term and long-term policy in place, even if the long-term policy stops paying once you're awarded Social Security disability, it at least bridges that gap, essentially. So in conclusion, we generally cannot anticipate if or when we're going to be diagnosed with an illness or an injury that leaves us unable to work our jobs. It's important to have a plan in place for what you will do if you cannot work. Short-term and long-term disability insurance can often be an important part of that plan. I have some contact information here. We just have some contacts, and I'm going to start taking questions from the chat. Again, if you want a copy of this presentation, I think send an email to Nora and she has a copy. She'll send that out to you. And let me just go to the chat. Take questions. All right. So Margot says, I have many questions. I might like to be referred to an expert in this field to talk to later. Okay. In short, my mother is 85 and has Medicare. It is Medicare open enrollment. Medicare does not cover home care. She has Alzheimer's. We're trying to get funding for home care to avoid a nursing home. She does not have long-term disability insurance, which is why it doesn't cover. Okay. So Margot, what you're referring to so what we're talking about is short-term and long-term disability here. And what you're referring to would be the policies that would help you in like a nursing home situation, which isn't the same product essentially. So long-term care insurance, this is short-term and long-term disability insurance. And what you're referring to is long-term care insurance. So it's slightly different. Is it too late for her to get? It is. I'm sorry to say it's absolutely too late for her to qualify for a long-term care insurance policy. You are definitely going to have to take another path to try to get her care. In your situation, you're asking about yourself. You should potentially look into, if you're concerned, I mean, you should consider looking into getting one of those policies for yourself. So long-term care insurance, not the same as long-term disability. So if you want more information, send me an email. I can send you the resources that I have. I can tell you when we're presenting about this topic as well. And if you have any other questions, put them in the chat. So also, would Medicare Advantage be a cost-effective method to get care for my mother? You're not going to get the care that you're looking for it's not likely that signing up for a Medicare Advantage plan is going to give you the care that you're looking for. But again, I think we should talk about this after the presentation. I can call, etc. Just because what you're talking about is an entirely different insurance product.
I will mention that on Thursday from 1 to 2 p.m., I believe, we're having another session from the Maryland Insurance Administration that'll be a little more general overview about insurance options in Maryland and kind of the differences between those. So if you have questions or want more information about that topic, that might be a great session to join as well.
Thanks, Nora. And somebody said that I think you're talking about me. Feel bad that one of the presenters showed up at work today. I just want to say I had the rest of the day off. So, but I'm a Maryland state employee. I'm one of the lucky ones that I can do that. All right, so. All right, yes, so Margo, let's definitely talk. I'm afraid to keep relying on Medicaid because its funding may eventually run out. Again, this is off of this topic, but I would say that in some cases you don't have any choice but to rely on Medicaid. All right, so I'm also starting a business and may like to offer long-term disability, short-term disability to my employees. Could a group plan cover both my family members and my employees? And what are the typical cost ranges? Well, great question. It's going to depend on the coverage. It's going to depend a lot. Whether or not you can include your family members in a group policy with your employees, I hesitate. My guess would be no, but I would talk to a broker who specializes in short-term and long-term disability policies, because it certainly is possible that that is a possibility. Does a higher number of people on a group plan mean less costs for each person? Probably. Oftentimes, the larger the group, the lower the premiums. So can people on SSI purchase private long-term disability insurance? So I'm guessing you mean Social Security disability. So SSDI, I would say it's highly unlikely that somebody who is already receiving Social Security disability insurance benefits would qualify to purchase a long-term disability insurance policy, because by definition, like they've already been disabled. And so that would be them selling a product where you would kind of immediately be on claim. And most insurance companies are not willing to do that. Does anyone else have any questions? There aren't any other questions in the chat. And yeah, if you do have any other questions, please ask. Did you have any questions,
Not right at the moment, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you so much again for joining us and contributing your time to this series, especially when you're not feeling well. Really appreciate you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a solid point. Like, I mean, certainly a lot of people in our country don't have proper sick time, etc. I'm lucky that, you know, our state benefits are good, and I just had to log in for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, thank you. Don't hesitate to send me an email. And Margo, don't hesitate to send me an email so we can follow up later in the week about the situation that you're having with your mother. And I'm very sorry.
Yeah, and thank you to all of the attendees for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of Patricia's slides, please send me an email. My email address is right at the top of the chat there. And if you have any other questions or want to know how to learn about the other sessions that we're having, including the one on Thursday about more general insurance options in Maryland, don't hesitate to reach out. And yeah, thank you all. And thank you again, Patricia.
Thanks. Thanks, Nora. All right. Well, I will see y'all on Thursday.
Take care, feel
All
better.
right. Thanks.
Bye.